Good morning. So we are here today is Yud Gimel Tishrei, which is the Stalkus Hilula of the Rebbe Marash, father of the Rebbe Rashab, Ayin Beis, that we've been learning from the Rebbe Rashab, his father, the Rebbe Marash. And being it's also going into Sukkot, from Yom Kippur to Sukkot, so let me share a few words about that. As we said, we will speak about more timely matters before we decide what we're going to learn on an ongoing basis, being that we finished the Hemshech Ayin Beis several times, especially the ending with the essay that I wrote. So we just begin. I remember a Farbrengen, a very unique Farbrengen. The year was Yud Gimel Tishrei Tavshin Mem. Tavshin Mem was 1979, the end of 79. It was the year actually I began writing Farbrengens officially that year. And Tavshin Mem was a very special year because it was the 30th anniversary of the Rebbe's leadership. And we had heard already from the grapevine that the Rebbe had said to some people who had complimented the Rebbe for all his achievements, the Rebbe said, "You've seen nothing yet, that after the Shnas HaShleshim will begin a whole new shlav, a whole new stage in the activities of Chabad and the Rebbe's work and so on." And that's indeed what happened in Tavshin Mem. It was a very watershed year. It was right after the Rebbe, 1978, 77, I should say, Shmini Atzeres is when the Rebbe had a heart attack. And the Rebbe was still bringing at that point most of the Shabbosim, not on Shabbos, but on Mitzvah Shabbos, Saturday night, because the doctors didn't want him to strain him, didn't want the Rebbe to strain himself. But in Tavshin Mem, the Rebbe would go back to Farbring Shabbos only, and the Mitzvah Shabbos Farbringen stopped that year. So it was a very year we really saw the Rebbe come back stronger than ever, because after the heart attack, of course, the Rebbe did not Farbring for a few days, at least not in public, till Yutas Kislev. I'm not going to go into that right now. But in Tavshin Mem, you could see the Rebbe started Farbringing much longer than the Farbringers that used to be up till that point. And it only began to accelerate into the next year, Tavshin Mem Aleph. Tavshin Mem was a Shnas Shemitah. It was also the next year was Shnas Hakel. Those are very special. I mean, all years were special, but you could see there were real changes taking place. And in a way, looking back in retrospect, you can say that the Rebbe began in a much more amplified fashion the global reach, talking a lot about Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, about the role of the United States of America, and about Mashiach being part of the process of transforming the world. So if you look back at the Rebbe's leadership, you could see that the concentric circles continue to widen as we go from decade to decade, from 1950 to 1960, from 1960 to 1970, and here now from 1970 to 1980, and now starting from 1979, 1980 to 1990, 1992, of course, the Rebbe had the stroke. So that was the tkufa that began that Tavshin Mem that year, which would be now 46 years ago, right? We're now in Pei Vov actually. So Tavshin Mem 46 years ago. So I remember very vividly. For me, it was a very historic year. As I was beginning, as I said, I became the official writer of Farbrengens. So I remember very strongly this Farbrengen of Yud Gimel Tishrei that year, 46 years ago today, was extraordinary Farbrengen. What I mean by that is, there were times you could see the Rebbe would open up and just start pouring. It would just come like a Mayan Amizgaber, like a living wellspring of thoughts and stories and ideas. It was a very spashistic, a very expansive Farbrengen. Worth listening to. It's one of those hidden gems that never really made it into so-called a formal, edited Farbrengen, but there's a recording of it, and there's, of course, the Hanoch of it, and it's quite powerful. So I want to share a few things from that Farbrengen that stand out, that I think are very relevant. and quite fascinating, actually. Middle of that Farbrengen, the Rebbe spoke about the Rebbe Marash, and he repeated something that the Rebbe Marash had said, that the Frierdiker Rebbe quoted from his grandfather, the Rebbe Marash, that he said that the Rabbeim, even though all the Rabbeim are really one entity, but each of them had their kav, their particular, you can say, track or path, with the Alter Rebbe being, with the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid corresponding to the level of Keser, Atik and Arich, Baal Shem Tov Atik and Magid Arich and Keser, the Alter Rebbe corresponding to Chochmah, the Mittler Rebbe Bina, his father, he said, the Tate, which is the Tzemach Tzedek, Das, and the Nochel Nazeh Weiter. And he said, and so it continues. Of course, he didn't speak about himself directly, but Chassidim understood from that the Rebbe Marash would then be Netzach, Chesed Gvura Teferes, for whatever reason, is skipped. The Rebbe Marash Netzach and the Rebbe Rashab Hoid, the Frierdiker Rebbe Yesod, and the Rebbe Malchus. So there you have all the 9 generations from the Baal Shem Tov, Keser, 2 levels in Keser, Chacham Bina Das, Netzach Hoid Yesod Malchus. I never heard an explanation why they skip Chesed Gvura Teferes, but remember Chesed Gvura Teferes, Netzach Hoid Yesod are really have certain synonymous elements to them, where Netzach Hoid Yesod are the 3 implementation emotions of Chesed Gvura Teferes. But I don't want to go into that either right now. And the Rebbe chazed over this. Then the Rebbe Marash said, this is all the Frierdiker Rebbe Sicha, he says, on Easter, and now we have to go to my father and hear what's doing. In Yiddish he said, Easter da verfahren zum Taten und Herrn was tut sich. Now we have to go to travel to my father and hear what's happening, which meant going to the oil of the Tzemach Tzedek, who was in Lubavitch. Remember, Lubavitch, there are 2 Rabbeim there. The Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe Marash are both interred. The oil of those 2 Rabbeim is in Lubavitch. The Alter Rebbe is in Haditch. The Mittler Rebbe is in Yezhin. And the Rebbe Rashab is in Rostov. But the Tzemach Tzedek and Rebbe Marash are in Lubavitch. So the Tzemach Tzedek, Rebbe Marash said, now we have to go to my father and hear what's happening. So the Rebbe asked the question, what is that the connection to Keser and the Rabbeim Chachma Bina Das, that now he says, and now we have to go to my father to hear what's happening. And the Rebbe's answer was that because the Tzemach Tzedek is Das, and Das is the Kav Amsoi, is a middle path that goes straight to Keser. Remember, Chachma is on the right, Bina is on the left, Das is in the center. So by going to Das, to the Tzemach Tzedek, to my father, the Rebbe Marash is saying, we'll hear what's going on in Keser all the way in the highest levels, because Das goes straight up to Keser. So if you want to really know what's happening, you go to my father. Das will take you all the way to the source. Not that Chachman Bina is a low level, but if you want to go all the way to the so-called engine room, you go through Das to Keser. That's what the Rebbe said. I remember, because it was not so common that you heard such expressions in Farbrengens, because it essentially was saying that's how the Rabbeim, in a way, by connecting to the Rabbeim before them, that's how they I guess, were able to have certain revelations and understanding of things. That's what the Rebbe said. So I want to talk about that a bit, especially considering that it's Yud Gimel Tishrei. The Rebbe then also brought that the Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe Marash, both of their yard sites are on Yud Gimel. The Tzemach Tzedek is Yud Gimel Nisan, and the Rebbe Rashab and the Rebbe Marash is Yud Gimel Tishrei. So Nisan and Tishrei, as we know, are 2 orders. The order of Nisim is Nisan. Nisan begins the lunar year, and the year that we began just now, Rosh Hashanah, and so on, is in Tishrei. So Chassidim said Yud Gimel's gematria Echad, and they said Echad ve'Echad Yugashu. There's a pasuk that says Echad ve'Echad meet. Echad meets Echad. So the Yud Gimel of the Rebbe Marash meets the Yud Gimel of the Rebbe of the Tzemach Tzedek, thus suggesting the connection between the two, with the Rebbe Marash, of course, being the youngest son of the Tzemach Tzedek, but he was the Mamala Mokim, the successor, that continued the line of Chabad. All the other sons of the Tzemach Tzedek were holy men, and they're even called Admurim. They were called Rebbes, but the Chabad Rebbe was the Rebbe Marash, according to the Tzemach Tzedek's Sava, that he wrote, that the Rebbe Marash should continue the line, and he was the successor. So Echad Be'echad Yigoshu. So you see from this, is that Yud Gimel Tishrei, the day we are right now, is connected to Achdus, to Echad, Gematria Echad, and it's connected to the Echad of the Tzemach Tzedek. And as I said, it's the Kavam Tzoy Das, because when you connect the Das, you go straight up to Keser. So it's like the previous, the Kavam Tzoy, the middle path that goes from the top all the way down, the middle path, like the spine, all the way to the top of Keser. So, in the same Farbrengen, the Rebbe also spoke about how the Rebbe Marash was known for his expression, L'chatchila Riber, that when the world says that if you can't go under, then you go over. You go from above. And I say you go L'chatchila from above. And the Rebbe explained that the Rebbe Marash's Hanhaga in general, his behavior was one of Baal Shem's Hanhaga. In other words, the Rebbe Marash had a direct connection to the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov was known for his miracles and doing things L'chatchila Riber. And to the point that the Tzemach Tzedek, whenever he would receive a gift, the story where he would receive a gift, let's say someone would buy him something as a gift, he would always send it to the Rebbe Marash. Tzemach Tzedek lived much more in austere fashion, whereas the Rebbe Marash, Bechitzenius, and the outer, lived more malchusdik. And the Rebbe explained that there's different times the Rebbe explained that this is two paths in Kedusha itself. There's a path of living very modestly, and there's a path of living and the Rebbe Marash on the outer surface, that's the way he lived. And they're both, as I said, two paths in serving Hashem. The Rebbe brought also that Yisrael Rizhiner also lived in a very malchusdik way, to the point that he would wear shoes that were made out of gold and diamonds and precious stones. His shoes were made like golden shoes. And people would say, a Rebbe is wearing such expensive shoes. But then they discovered that the shoes had no soles. So he was literally walking on the ground. It was only external. In other words, he looked malchusdik like L'chaved L'seferes on the outside, but he was actually in quite pain when he walked, because he walked on his actual feet. So that is a discussion of its own, why he did that. But the point is that in Kedusha, like you see in the Beis HaMikdash, everything had to be from the best gold, the best silver, the best copper. Not because we're materialistic, but because when you're doing something for Hashem, you have to always bring the best. As the Rambam paskins, you bring the best, like Hevel and Kayin. Hevel brought from the best, and Kayin brought from second best. So when you in Kedusha, like Bikurim, the first fruit offering, or in the morning when we say Moda'ani, we're bringing from our best strengths and we're giving it. So the Rebbe Marash represented that Harchava, which of course connects him again to the Baal Shem Tov. Now, a few more, I'll tell another story or two from the Rebbe Marash, and then I'll discuss it more. What is the deeper significance of all of this? So the Rebbe Marash, of all the Rabbeim, I think he lived the least. He passed away. He was born in Tov Kuf Tzadik Zayin, passed away in Tov Resh Chavov. So he was, one second. He was born in Tov Kuf Tzadik Daled, 6, and passed away in Tov Resh Mem Gimel. So he was 43. I think he was 49, if I recall correctly. So of all the Rabbeim, he lived he passed away quite young, relatively speaking. But he left us a whole series of Maimorim. He became Rebbe in Tafresh Chavav after the Tzemach Tzedek Sistalkus, Hilula, and he was a Rebbe from Tafresh Chavav till Tafresh Mem Gimel. That would be less than Chavav to Mem Gimel is Lamavav Memvav, would be 17 years that he was a Rebbe. And each of those years we have an entire Sefer Maimorim that he wrote. So he wrote a lot of Chassidus, relatively speaking, but not as much as the others. And also his life, even though on one hand he lived in a very, as I said, expansive way, but he was also a Bal Yisurim. He had a lot of pain, and there are many different stories of how he suffered greatly throughout his life, health-wise and so on. So there's a story, interesting story that I heard years ago that it's nice to share on the Yud Gimel Tishrei. And the story goes like this, that the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek once said a Maimer Chassidus, and he quoted an Eitz Chaim from the Arizal. And it was very complicated, and the Chassidim didn't really understand it. So afterwards, the Chazorah, when they were reviewing the Maimer, they were discussing what is the meaning of this, the Eitz Chaim and the Pshat in the Eitz Chaim. And whoever they asked the different children of the Tzemach Tzedek, no one really understood. Now, no one asked the Rebbe Marash, because the Rebbe Marash was known to be more of a businessman. So people didn't realize who he was. He was very discreet and very understated, and you never really saw. So not that, of course, he was a man of stature, but they saw more. He was in business and he was doing things. They didn't see it as the person to ask. Then when I think one of the Chassidim asked the Tzemach Tzedek, and he said, "Why don't you ask my son, the Rebbe Shmuel was his name, Shmuel." So okay, so he decides to go to the Rebbe Marash's house, and as he's coming to the house, he looks through the window and he sees the Rebbe Marash has the Eitz Chaim open, and he's really like immersed in it, engrossed in studying the Eitz Chaim that the Tzemach Tzedek just discussed, that they all were befuddled about, confused about. Okay, he knocks on the door. As he comes in, lo and behold, he looks on the table. The Eitz Chaim is nowhere to be seen. There's a bunch of newspapers on the table. The stock exchange, the European stock exchange newspapers were there. And the Chassid says to Rebbe Marash, he wasn't Rebbe yet, but he says to him, he was wondering whether he could help understand what the Tzemach Tzedek said in the Maimer about Eitz Chaim. And Rebbe Marash looked at him and said, "Why are you asking me? Ask my brothers. Ask other elder Chassidim, the older Chassidim. Yeah, I mean, I have other things that I'm involved in," as he pointed to the table. Anyway, the Chassid goes over, pulls off the newspapers, and there's the Eitz Chaim sitting there. And he says to Rebbe Marash, "If you don't tell me, I'll tell everyone that you have Eitz Chaim and you're hiding the fact, hiding it under newspapers." So the Rebbe Marash sat with him for all night, hours long. He gave him a full explanation of the Eitz Chaim and what the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek said, and the explanation and so on. And it was mind-blowing. Later, there's one more piece to the story. Later they met, and the Rebbe Marash asked him, "Do you remember our discussion about the Eitz Chaim?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "But do you remember how many cups of tea we drank that night?" Because while they were discussing, the Rebbe Marash had offered him tea. So they drank tea, and they were drinking tea through the night. So he said, "No." So the Rebbe Marash said, "Then you really didn't appreciate what we discussed. Because the Chiddush would be not just that you learned the idea, but that you also were grounded enough, Rotzei and Shuv, and grounded enough to be able to know how many cups of tea we drank." And he said to him, I think, I'm trying to remember the number, it could be 13 cups, I don't remember exactly the number. So I heard the story one year, Pesach time, when the Rebbe would visit in the 70s, primarily in the 70s, the Rebbe would visit, well, also in the 60s, but stopped, I think, by 78. The Rebbe would visit the Bochrim for their Seder. Before they made the Seder, the first night of Pesach, the Rebbe would go to see the Bochrim and give them a bracha. That year, that probably would be, I'm trying to remember what year, 76 or 77, maybe 79. I don't remember what year it was. The Seder, for a number of years, was in 1414 President Street, but that year, for whatever reason, it was upstairs where the kollel is now. You know, the Farband upstairs over Tzach on Kingston Avenue, upstairs there. So that's where the Bochum made the Seder. And the Rebbe went up there and walked up the steps, and then he turned to Dovber Askin and asked him, does he know how many steps we just walked? So Dovber Askin said no. So the Rebbe said 26 steps. I think he said 26. So then I remember some bochum were talking, and someone told the story of the Rebbe Marash of how many cups, because you could think, what difference does it make how many steps there are, or how many cups of tea they drank? But it's a demonstration that even when you're in the highest levels of Klei Nefesh and so on, it's grounded, that you know what's happening also on earth. And it permeates even the practical, even a simple thing like the number of steps you walk or a number of cups of tea. So I'll share one more story that I heard from, that I read once. Name of a man, a chassid, his name was Rabbi Kanikov. Actually the grandfather of the Rabbi Kanikov, where I was for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur in Southampton. And I confirmed the story with him. It's a very powerful story. You may have heard it before. I've shared it a number of times. So the Rebbe Marash lived in Lubavitch, of course. And the Rabbeim in the city of Lubavitch, their house was attached to the Zal, to the Beis Medrash and the Beis HaKnesses, to the Shul and the Zal where the Bochum learned. And the way it was structured was like a building like in the shape of an L, where the Shul and the Beis Medrash were like in the one part of the L, and the other part of the L was the house of the Rabbeim. That's where the Rabbeim lived. The Tzemach Tzedek in his time, Mittler Rebbe, then the Rebbe Marash. Now there was a connection between the house, the apartments of the Rebbe and the Shul. You can go in. There were two. The Shul consisted of two big rooms, like upstairs in 770. One was called a Cheder Rishon, a larger room, and a smaller room, a Cheder Sheni. You go upstairs in 770, the original 770, you see these two rooms. It wasn't necessarily the same size, but there were these two rooms. At the corner of the smaller room, there was a door that went down a hall and connected to the L, to the apartments of the Rabbeim. But they would not use that door. They would go outside and enter the shul or enter the Beis Medrash from outside. You can go from outside or from inside, but they never used the inside door. It was always locked, whatever reason. One night, a chassid, his name was Rabbi Rachmiel. He was a chassid of the Rebbe Marash, but he was also, he learned with the Rebbe Marash when they were young. They learned together in Cheder, or they were chavrusa. So he was a chassid, but also a chaver. Obviously now the Rebbe is the Rebbe, but they had a personal connection from childhood. So Rabbi Rachmiel was around midnight, and he's sitting learning in the Cheder Sheni. He's sitting and learning, and there's a chassid, an older chassid. Suddenly, the door that very rarely opens up, and the Rebbe Marash is coming through that door. As I said, that's not the door they would use. They would go from outside, but he's coming through the door. So of course he jumped up, Rabbi Rachmiel, and he saw the Rebbe Marash is walking very awkwardly. He wasn't walking straight. He was like walking like on a side, as if he's walking near someone else, as if he's escorting someone. So Rabbi Rachmiel sees the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash sees him. The Rebbe Marash says to him, Ich bagleit Gast. I'm escorting a guest. Now, of course, there was no one to be seen. Rachmiel was not a simple chassid. He didn't say, I don't see anyone. What are you saying? He said to the Rebbe Marash, where did the Rebbe learn how to escort? So the Rebbe Marash says, I'll tell you. He says, when I was a child, I used to learn every night after Ma'ariv. I had a 15-minute learning shir with my father, Tzemach Tzedek. And it was very precious for me, those 15 minutes. For a number of years, we learned together. I was a young child. One night, I come to my scheduled time, and my father's door to his room is closed. Now, the door was always open unless there was a guest there. But when there was a guest, my father would tell the family beforehand that tonight there's a guest coming to see me, meaning a yechidus or someone coming to see the Tzemach Tzedek. My father didn't announce it to anyone, and here the door's closed. So I had chutzpah. He's telling all this to Rabbi Rachmiel. So I decided to look through the keyhole. Who's the guest? What's going on here? So he looked through the keyhole. He says, and I saw an older man, and from his appearance, it looked like my grandfather, meaning the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe was the Tzemach Tzedek's father-in-law and also uncle, and therefore the grandfather of the Rebbe Marash. And it appeared, and this was after his istalkus. So I decided to knock on the door. My time to learn. No one told me otherwise. I don't want to miss out this opportunity. Tzemach Tzedek asks, who is it? And he says his name. His name was Shmuel. So he says, come in. He comes in, and the Tzemach Tzedek says to the Rebbe, to the guest. That's the way the Rebbe Marash referred to him. To the guest, he said to the guest, this is my youngest son, Shmuel. And he tells his youngest son, this is a special guest. Didn't say any name. He said his guest. So the guest, the Rebbe Marash is telling Rachmiel, the guest turns to my father and says, tell your son to share something from Chassidus, a vort of Chassidus. There's a chazan, a vort Chassidus. Should repeat something from a Chassidic idea that he's learned. I think that Tzemach Tzedek even said, this is our time when we learn together. So the guest said, tell him to chazer over something from Chassidus. The Rebbe Marash says to Rabbi Rachmiel, I'm not going to chazer Chassidus in front of my father, in front of my grandfather. So I said to my father, tell the guest he should chazer something and I'll repeat it. That's what the Rebbe Marash said. And the guest said, okay, good. And the guest said some Torah in Chassidus. And then my father asked me to chazer it over, and I repeated it. And the guest said to my father, your son, your Shmuel, says very good. Good. He repeated it well. Okay, and then my father escorted the guest out of his room. He said, that's where I learned how to escort. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek said to the Rebbe Marash said to Rabbi Rachmiel. That's where I learned how to escort. In explaining to him that he was escorting someone out from through the door that they were walking. Okay. So the Rabbi Rachmiel was a Chabad Chassid. He wasn't flustered by this clearly miraculous experience. So he says to Rebbe Marash, and what was the Torah? What was the Torah that your father said? You wanted to know what was the Chassidic Torah that the guest said, rather. That the guest said that you repeated. And meanwhile, someone else walked into the room, that second small shul. So that's something Rebbe Marash said for another time. We'll talk about it another time. Story's not over. The next morning, the Rebbe Marash's two sons, he had three sons, but he had the two of the sons, the Rebbe Rashab and the Razah, came running to Rabbi Rachmiel and said, what happened around midnight last night here in the Cheder Sheni? So Rabbi Rachmiel said, if you know, why are you asking me? They said, we want to know how revealed it was. Viful Sigivem Bizgalus, how revealed it was. That's the story. And I heard it straight from a person who heard it from Rabbi Rachmiel. I read it. He wrote it down. This man called Rav Konikov, a chassid from the Rebbe Rashab's times, he wrote it down, this story. So I thought it's a very powerful story, but especially I like the end. Firstly, that they asked what Torah it was, and second, that they wanted to know how revealed it was. They knew something happened, but they wanted to know how manifest it was, that people could see what was happening. So go back to the original point. What you see here is like this. When it comes, we've learned this, of course, in Ayin Beis, and in general, Chassidus talks about the balance, talk about the interface between the divine and existence. And you see from a number of these stories that the Rebbe Marash captured both extremes. On one hand, Lechatchila Riber, connecting to Keser, all the way to the highest levels, but also grounding it in the amount of cups of tea. He brought it down, even though on the outside he was a businessman, but the truth is he was a Rebbe. He just dressed up in that fashion. And of course now in this story as well, that on one hand connected to like Baal Shem's Kamaisa, such a story. He's escorting, obviously he was probably escorting his father, most likely. I mean, we don't know from the story who he was escorting, but it was definitely someone from another world. And at the same time, the Chassid Abrahamiel didn't lose himself in the miraculous events and these amazing events that which most people would be like shocked by, and he wanted to know what the Torah was. You have to always ground it. So in that context, you could say when you say Yud Gimel Tishrei, Echad be'echad Yigoshu Echad. So Achdus, as we learn, Hashem Echad, Achdus means you're connecting, you're uniting seamlessly different realities and recognizing that they're all part of one reality, which is godliness. But you cannot negate existence, like we learned at length in Ayin Beis, that the goal is not to eliminate the tzimtzum and eliminate existence or annihilate existence. The goal is to permeate existence, that existence itself should recognize that it's really expression and extension of godliness. That's a dir b'tachtenim, that there are tachtenim, and at the same time, you make a dir le'yizbarach, a home in tachtenim, which in essence is also the theme of this whole holiday season. And on one hand, we'll have all these great giluyim of Rosh Hashanah, where everything goes back to the original primordial state, and Tiku b'chodesh Shefer, Zeh hayom tchilas masecha, the beginning of it all, everything is recreated anew, and the same with Yom Kippur, which is, of course, reaching all the way into Yechida, into the Etzem itself, like we learned the Maimer last week, because it's reaching in the deepest levels of Atzmus. But and then, of course, all of that then comes into Sukkot. So Chassidus explains that the first half of the month is like Yira, and the second half of the month is like Ahava. And that's the joining of these two extremes as well. Yomim Noroyim, days of awe, days of reverence, is Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Like the Zohar calls it Smele Tachas L'Reishi. Your left arm is below my head, holds me below my head. The smile is Gvura, Yira, a sense of awe, of reverence, of distance, and a good distance, recognizing and respecting and standing before God and being accountable. The second half of the month, says the Zohar, is Yemine Techapkeni, and with your right arm you embrace me. So the left arm you hold me under my head, and the right arm you embrace me from Shir Hashirim, because Yemin is Chesed, and Chesed is Amshoche, not Halah, not going from the bottom up, standing in awe of God, but it's bringing it down. Hamshocha of Simcha, Zman Simcha Seinu. That's why Sukkot is the opposite. It's Ava, it's a show of love. And how do we express that love? Through dancing and singing, Zman Simcha Seinu. And as Chassidus explains, is the Gilui, Bakesel Yem Chagenu, that which is concealed, that joy and celebration, which also exists in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but it's more subdued and more encased, if you wish, within the reverence of those sacred days. So that all gets revealed in full glory in the expression of Simcha, starting right away with Samachta B'Chagecha from the beginning of Sukkot, and of course every day it only grows till we reach the high point in the apex of it all, which is Ashmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. But it's essentially celebrating Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but now in a kav of Chesed and Ava, in contrast to the kav of Yira. So Yira and Ava is also, as we learned, like Mamata L'mayla, Mamayla Lamata. On one hand, we go and reach the highest levels above, but on the other hand, we have to integrate it and internalize it. And that's why we say, V'lekachtem lechem b'yem harishin, lechem. That when you take the Daled Mim, it says lechem. So Chassidus says lechem means lepnimiyuschem. You are internalizing it. That's why you carry it, hold it by your heart. The 4 minim, when you take the esrog, the lulav, and the adasim, and the aravis, and what? And you bring them all by aguda achas, like echad, like we said about echad ba'echad yigashu, that you unite. They're all a form of unity. Sukkah represents that unity, but all in a form of gilui. And simcha is revealed. Chassidus explains, tainug can be more concealed. Simcha is always revealed. Simcha is in a form of revelation. That's why the primary mitzvah of Achnosas Archim is on Sukkot, or in general Yom Tov. even though we also have the mitzvah on Shabbos, but because we am simchasna, but Shabbos is more einig, and there is some simcha, but the real simcha, and simcha can, as the Rambam says, simcha can never be celebrated alone. That's why we invite friends and guests to simchas, because a simcha, to be complete, you celebrate with others. So Sukkot is all about celebration, about gilui, revealing, and unity. And all the mitzvahs of Sukkot is about unity. You sit everyone, Ruyim Kol Yisrael Leisha B'Sukkah Achas, one sukkah where everybody gets united. And the same thing with the Dalet Minim, are the four different types of categories of Jews, from with those with Torah mitzvahs, those without Torah mitzvahs, those with Torah no mitzvahs, those with mitzvahs without Torah, or primarily with one or the other, and you join them all together by Aguda Achas, you bind them together in one unified entity. So bottom line is that the themes of Yud Gimel Tishrei, and in general of Chassidus, of joining together the highest of the levels, Keser, and bring it all the way down into existence, into the structures of existence, very much the themes of Ayin Beis, which of course is the mimer, the Ayin Beis begins b'shoshik dimu. And I should also mention that the first mimer the Rebbe Rashab ever said was Keser Yitnu. It was a mimer Yom Tov mimer, because the last mimer of the Rebbe Marash was Keser Yitnu, a Sukkos mimer, because we say Keser in Yom Tov. So the last mimer of the Rebbe Marash was Keser Yitnu, and the first mimer of the Rebbe Rashab was Keser. Interesting connection to Keser, which of course is the central theme of Ayin Beis, and as well as the idea of the interface that we learned about at length, Keser Rotzen, that is the interface that joins together the godly Elokus and Metzias, the divine and existence. And the Rebbe Marash captures that, the Rebbe Rashab as well. The Rebbe Rashab was born on Chof Cheshvan. Chof is the Rosh Hashanah's Keser, Chof, and the year Kisra, in Aramaic, Tofresh Chof Aleph, the year that Rebbe Rashab was born, is called Kisra. Tofresh Chof Aleph is the letters Keser with an Aleph. In Aramaic, you say Kisra with an Aleph at the end. So it all comes together in a beautiful way, and it teaches us, of course, the lessons that we've been learning throughout are all manifest in all the times of the year. But we're talking now, we're literally in the days going from Yom Kippur, and we're going into Sukkot, which tomorrow will be Erev Sukkot, today's Yud Gimel Tishrei. I thought I would just tie it all together, obviously basing this all on many Maimarim Chassidus. We didn't learn it inside. I didn't think we'd have time to learn a full text. So instead of doing that, I decided to just bring it all together with a few stories and a few ideas. So there you have my Erev Sukkot piece, and connecting it to all the different themes of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, as well as the themes of Ayin Beis. And now I will stop here if anybody wants to comment or have any questions, or discuss any further points in this regard.
It's beautiful, Rabbi, and thank you. And I listened to the Friday class. I couldn't attend, and I agree with everything everybody said there. And these stories are amazing. And I just wondered because during one of my Yom Kippur experiences was that usually during the Ela, it's hard for me to stand the whole time. I didn't feel it at all this time. And there was really a point where I felt like, a real, my soul was open, right? And I'm just wondering if Yom Kippur is like the hinge that you're talking about, Ava and Yira, also, when you get it, not Yom Kippur, the whole Yom Kippur, but Ne'ilah, or do you have to wait until the day after, like guts numb, and like you said?
Well, so first of all, standing or sitting, it's people sit during the Ila too, even though the ark is open. So if you sat, it's perfectly fine. It's all right. Just telling you. You don't need to do tshuva on that, okay? As far as hinge, well, look, Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. It's the day when all the doors are open, and the level of Yechida and the soul has easiest access. But remember, God is with us 24/7 all days of the year. So it always can access. But Yom Kippur is a day where you have, it's like there are just like Shabbos is a holier day than the rest of the week. There are less layers and less obstacles between us and accessing the divine. So Yom Kippur is a critical day, but it's not like if a person didn't completely do that proper Avodah Yom Kippur, it's all over. God forbid, that's not the case. We learn that Yom Kippur, the etzem of the day itself, has something that accomplishes it. But the more you integrate it and internalize it, obviously, the more effect it's going to have. It's like anything in life. You can have a beautiful experience, but the more you're prepared, the more you internalize it, the more you integrate it, the more powerful it is. So in a way, Yom Kippur now is being internalized in these days following Yom Kippur, and especially on Sukkot. Sukkot is the integration of Yom Kippur into our lives through joy and through celebration. And there are many places in Chassidus that discuss Yom Kippur Sukkot connection. In my book 60 Days, I have a lot about this. When you look at these days right now, as the transition from Yom Kippur to Sukkot, I cite quite a few sources and quite a few ideas of how the Yom Kippur experience transitions and is channeled into the following days, into Sukkot, and then of course from Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, into the rest of the year. Okay.
Yes, thank you. I didn't mean, no, I hear you 100%, and I'm just saying we also feel joy when the holiday, almost not joy, but a mixture like of sadness and joy when the holiday leaves, just like with Shabbos, and yeah, I just think that there was, having had learned all of the Hasidus that we learned, it really did imbue the holiday with, definitely a feeling of greater closeness. So I'm very thankful to you.
Yeah, my honor, my pleasure. We continue this journey. Yep.
Reb Simon, what you said about Yom Kippur, of course, but it's important, you said it, that the whole entire month is one continuation. And in Shmini Atzeres and in Simchas Torah, we're reaching the highest of the highest. I cannot find the exact words, but this is to the Simcha, to Simchas Torah, or Shmini Atzeres.
But as you know, you can't get there if you don't go through Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and all the days before. It's like the Shad Hanun. You need the 49 days before you get to the Shad Hanun, right?
I actually think three things in your stories have something in general. All of them about balance between grounding and something out, about luxury and simplicity, about reality as we see, and extra reality that we're not familiar with. From this point of view about balancing in between, I found we are very materialistic people. We need something really tangible in order to get our choice in between. For example, when you said about the luxury, and I heard about the luxury of other rabbim and how they presented it, at the same time, Rebbe, as I know from the stories, had a very simple life. It was shocked for me when I heard that even the cups, what they use for tea, were not the cups, but the container from the some kind of left from the product that they bought. at this point, how we can find this balance, or where about the people who from another world. I understand another point. We can easily fall into the sorcery, and it's also have to be balanced, have to be grounded. Where can we find the bounding not to fall into another wrong side? Definitely none of what you said is from the wrong side, but we are from another another um, another world. Our life is absolutely different from our theirs.
Yeah, but we learn lessons from everything. So that's the bottom line. You learn lessons from everything.
Yes, but where can we find this
Well, I just thought for the last hour, I think
thread?
I think all these things are lessons for all of us. If we're told about these stories and these events, even though, Moshe Rabbeinu in the Torah is also a great man. None of us are going to be his level, but we learn lessons from them all the time, and we learn lessons from all these stories and all these experiences. That's the bottom line. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
I want to comment and just say thank you. This has been such an eye-opening class, and I just also wanted to let you know that so far during this class, I have drank 2 cups of tea. Thank you very much.
Really?
Yeah, well, I'm getting over a respiratory infection, so I'm drinking a lot of tea to clear things in my throat and chest.
Oh, okay. You should feel better.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you for this class. It's absolutely.
By the way, did you ever hear from that woman that the story with the woman with the candle that lit the candles?
No, and I've been back to that place, I think at least 4 or 5 times since then, and nothing. So if I have an update, I'll update you, but so far nothing.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for your kind words. Anybody else would like to say anything? Because this will be the last class before Yom Tov, because tomorrow I'm traveling. And so the next class will be a week from Friday. Meaning we'll be off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yeah, 12 days. 12 days, because this coming week, of course, is the holiday. Next week is the holiday. I'm returning Thursday. So just telling you, we'll put it on the group so you'll know. But I wanted to just talk about the little Sukkot themes and so on. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Just that these stories are so powerful that, there's no substitute for these stories. I mean, it's
Agreed.
wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing them.
Yeah, agreed. I'll share one more story that I always love this story. It's a Rebbe Marash, but it's also Rebbe Rashab. So in contrast to Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab was a Rebbe for many years, because he became Rebbe in Tov Reish Mem Gimel, and all the way till Tov Reish Pei. That would be Nun Gimel, Sam Gimel, Ayin Gimel, 37 years. And he was only 22 years old when he became a Rebbe. Literally 22 years old. Chaf Aleph. He was born Chaf Aleph, Lamed Aleph, yeah. So, but he was, of course, some great stature. Now, the Rebbe Rashab, when he traveled, he always liked to be very anonymous and very discreet. They didn't want people to know who he was, etc. And so right after his father passed away, I don't know, it must be a few months after, he was traveling to Europe. He used to go also for health reasons and in general. And he came to a town in Germany. He came into a shul, and someone went over to him and said, Shalom Aleichem. They welcomed him. From Vanakum Tayid. In Yiddish, you say, where does a Jew come from? Where do you come from? So he says, from Lubavitch. Comes from the city called Lubavitch. So the guy says, oh, we hear that there's a new Rebbe now in Lubavitch. And though he's young, but they say he's a genius, and he's a Yireh Shamayim, and he's a tzaddik, and a holy man. And is it true? They're asking the Rebbe Rashab about himself. Whether it's true that he's such a great man. So how does the Rebbe answer such a question? So he says, but he doesn't come close to his father. That's what he answered. That's how his response. In Yiddish, he said, oh, but I kommt nicht zum Taten. He doesn't come close to his father. I thought it was quite an interesting answer, that he didn't tell an untruth, but he also put things into context with the right humility that he had. And one more, if I may. The Rebbe Marash, as I said, passed away Yud Gimel Tishrei. So it was a day before Sukkot, a day before Erev Sukkot. In those days, there was no faxes and no email. And in general, till the word got out, took time. So only people in Lubavitch knew when Sukkot came. Most of the Chabad Chassidim that didn't live local didn't know that the Rebbe Marash had passed, was nostalgic. But over Chol HaMoed, the word spread, the tragic news spread, the sad news spread. And the city called Chernovitz, the news arrived on Hoshana Rabbah, the last day before Shmini Atzeres. And in Chernovitz, the Chassid, the Rav, the rabbi of Chernovitz, was a famous Chassid. His name was Radatz, Rab David Tzvi Chaim. The big rabbi, a big Chassid, big Chabad Chassid. He didn't hear about it until he came to shul, Shmini Atzeres at night. Because I said the news arrived at Hoshana Rabbah to Chernovitz. When this Rav came to the shul for Yom Tov, and that night you also do Hakofis in Chabad, that's when they told him, right before dancing, they told him the Rebbe is Avek. That was the expression, the Rebbe left. In Yiddish, when you say Avek means he left, he meant he left this world. He was so shaken by that, he fainted. He fainted right there on the spot. And they couldn't revive him. They could not revive him. They brought a doctor, they brought doctors, and it was like dangerous. He was lying there. They could not in any way revive him. Anyway, he had his father, was already an older man. His name was Peretz Chaim. But he was home because he was not well. Peretz Chaim, just as an aside, was the only chassid ever that saw 6 Rebbes, 6 Chabad Rebbes. He was a little child. He was born and was a little child when the Alter Rebbe passed away. And he saw the Frierdiker Rebbe when the Frierdiker Rebbe was a young child. So he saw 6 of the 7 Rebbes, the Peretz Chaim. Now he was at home, and they decided, you know what, maybe his father has some way to revive his son. So they brought him to shul. I don't know, they carried him, I'm not sure how, but the bottom line is he came to shul, and he heard what happened. He bends down to his son, who's lying there, literally in a faint. And he whispers to him, he says, A Rebbe geht kemel nicht avek. A Rebbe never leaves. That expression they use, that the Rebbe left, avek, he said, a Rebbe never leaves. And his son was revived. I'm sure he wasn't exactly in a great mood, but that's how he woke him, by telling him a Rebbe never leaves. I always find the story very powerful, especially after Gimel Tammuz. A Rebbe never leaves. A Rebbe that never forsakes, like it says, Le Yaziv Tzei Marisa. Tzei Marisei. That a shepherd will never forsake his sheep. I wanted to just share that as well. Okay, a few more stories to carry into Sukkot.
Amazing. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep that one in mind.
Yeah, it's a very powerful story. So, with that, unless somebody wants to ask something more or say, I think we should. I never like to sign off, but I think we have to do that. I have a lot to do these days. Everyone should have a very, very meaningful Sukkot and a very joyful year, and use Sukkot well. Draw from the joy. It should be joy in a revealed way for everyone in their lives, materially and spiritually, and joy for Jewish people everywhere, with the hostages released, hopefully once and for all,
Amen.
as well as the Jews being protected everywhere, especially in Israel and everywhere in the world. And we should have already Sukkot. It says in some Sfarim that Sukkot is Mashiach will come in Sukkot. So let that happen immediately, and we will resume our learning right afterwards, as I said, next week, and we'll post on the group exact schedules and so on. But I'll miss you all, and celebrate well, and share with your families and friends and colleagues and everyone you meet some of the thoughts and ideas we're learning together. That's the best way to talk about perpetuating these teachings. That's the best way to do that. And it's, again, a great honor to be here with you all, and it should be a beautiful year.
Amen. The honor is all ours, believe me. I'm so grateful to have this time. It's very, very special. So thank you, Rabbi.
Yes, my pleasure, my honor.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Okay. So
and you should have the same wonderful and special Sukkot and all the last days of the holiday.
Okay. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much. Amen to you. Thank you for your blessings. And we got the hearts and the thank yous from our local heart, our resident heart specialist. And everybody